Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel NPA Discovery, where we look beyond the photographs, the magazine covers, and the polished stories Hollywood leaves behind to understand the real human lives that existed behind them. Today, we are talking about Jon-Erik Hexum. If you have seen photographs of him but never knew his story, you might reasonably wonder how someone who looked so perfectly designed for 1980s Hollywood could have almost disappeared from popular memory. He was tall, athletic, charismatic, musically gifted, intelligent, funny, ambitious, and by the age of 26, he seemed to be standing at the beginning of the kind of career that could have lasted for decades. He had already starred in a network television series. He had appeared opposite major Hollywood names. He had made his first feature film. And in 1984, he had just landed another primetime television role that seemed perfectly designed around everything audiences liked about him. Then, in a matter of seconds, everything changed. Jon-Erik Hexum died following an accident involving a blank-loaded firearm on the set of Cover Up. He was only 26, but if we tell this story only as a bizarre Hollywood accident, we miss what may be the most meaningful part of it. Because Jon-Erik's death was not simply an ending. His final decision, made before the accident, when he had no reason to believe his own life was in immediate danger, allowed parts of him to continue living in other people. His heart continued beating for years inside another man's chest. His kidneys gave desperately ill patients another chance. His corneas restored sight. His skin helped treat a badly burned child. So do I agree with the dramatic idea that Jon-Erik Hexum's story is mainly about one of television's most shocking deaths? Only partly. The accident is unforgettable. But I think the greater story is about potential. About how quickly a future can disappear. About the hidden pressure underneath ambition. About the dangerous difference between something appearing harmless and actually being harmless. And finally, about what it means to leave something valuable behind when your own time ends much earlier than anyone expected. Before we go any further, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who loves classic television and Hollywood history, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue creating thoughtful stories about the remarkable people behind the entertainment industry. And please stay with me until the end. Because the final chapter of Jon-Erik Hexum's life contains one of the most powerful reminders I have ever encountered about how much good a single human being can leave behind. Jon-Erik Hexum was born on November 5, 1957, in Englewood, New Jersey. His family background was Norwegian. His father had emigrated from Norway, while his mother also came from Norwegian ancestry. If you saw Jon-Erik as an adult, it was easy to understand why people sometimes associated him with a Scandinavian image. He was over 6 feet tall. Strongly built. Light-eyed. Physically commanding. But the life behind that appearance was not a story of luxury. His parents separated when he was very young. Jon-Erik was reportedly around 4 years old when the family structure changed. From then on, much of the responsibility for raising Jon-Erik and his older brother fell to their mother. She worked hard. According to the source material, she sometimes held 2 jobs in order to support the family. That detail is important because it gives us a very different picture from the man audiences later saw on television. Before Hollywood turned Jon-Erik into an image of male perfection, he was a boy watching his mother work. Before expensive studio sets, there were household bills. Before television interviews, there was a woman trying to make enough money to raise 2 sons. And yet, despite financial pressure, his mother apparently believed that survival alone was not enough. She wanted her children to experience culture, education, music, theater, creativity. She found a way to provide a piano. Jon-Erik took music lessons. He learned instruments. He sang. He danced. He performed. Think about the significance of that. When money is limited, every expense communicates values. Buying a piano is not merely buying an object. It is saying, I believe something inside you deserves development. That kind of investment can shape a child for life. There is a lesson here for parents, teachers, and anyone responsible for young people. You cannot predict which experience will become the doorway. A music lesson may create confidence. A school play may reveal a talent. A basketball coach may teach discipline that later appears in business. A teacher's encouragement may become the sentence someone remembers 40 years later. We often think development requires enormous resources. Sometimes development begins with one adult noticing something and saying, "Let's see where this goes." Jon-Erik seems to have responded to those opportunities almost immediately. By elementary school, he had already tasted performance. And instead of moving away from it, he kept moving deeper. By high school, Jon-Erik Hexum was not simply participating. He seemed determined to participate in almost everything. He played musical instruments. He became drum major. He performed in school productions. He became his school's first male cheerleader. He was elected class president. Even before Hollywood, there was a pattern. Visibility did not frighten him. He seemed comfortable stepping forward. That matters. Many talented people never become publicly successful because their fear of being seen is stronger than their desire to express themselves. Jon-Erik appears to have had the opposite temperament. He moved toward the spotlight. But there was something else. His interests were unusually broad. He was musical, athletic, academic, social. Theater interested him. Leadership interested him. Sports interested him. That combination would later make him extremely marketable. Hollywood loves people who appear capable of inhabiting multiple fantasies at once. Jon-Erik could look like an athlete, a romantic lead, an adventurer, a prince, a model, an action hero. But before he committed fully to acting, he pursued education. He initially enrolled at Case Western Reserve University and studied biomedical engineering. That fact often surprises people. The future television heartthrob began in a demanding academic field. But he soon realized it was not the correct path for him. So he transferred to Michigan State University and studied political philosophy. This is worth pausing on. We often treat changing direction as failure. A student starts engineering and switches majors. Someone leaves a stable job. A person realizes the profession they spent years preparing for is not right. And they feel ashamed. They imagine everyone else has life figured out. But changing direction can be a sign of intelligence. There is no prize for efficiently traveling toward the wrong destination. Jon-Erik discovered that one academic path did not fit. So he changed. Yet performance kept following him. He worked in radio. He took stage roles. He played football as a backup. His life kept pulling him toward communication and visibility. By graduation, the question was becoming harder to ignore. Was he going to build a conventional career? Or was he going to gamble on the thing that kept returning? He chose the gamble. Jon-Erik's heart was transplanted into Michael Washington, a 36-year-old man from Las Vegas. Washington had severe heart disease. His future was already narrowing. He had children. He had served in Vietnam. He had been decorated for his military service. And now he was confronting the possibility that his heart would fail before medicine could find a solution. Then came Jon-Erik. Not in the way either man could ever have imagined. A surgeon removed the heart from the body of a 26-year-old actor whose career had suddenly ended. That heart was placed inside another man's chest. This is one of the most extraordinary realities of modern medicine. Identity and biology collide. The organ that had accelerated during Jon-Erik's football practices. The heart that had beaten during auditions. The heart that had raced during romance. The heart that had supported every moment of his life was now keeping someone else alive. Washington apparently did not initially know the identity of the donor. Later, he learned. Gratitude and grief become intertwined. How do you celebrate without feeling guilty? How do you thank a family that has just lost a son? Washington reportedly wanted to learn about Jon-Erik. He watched episodes of Cover Up. The experience moved him emotionally. Of course it did. Imagine watching the face of the man whose heart is physically beating inside you. This sounds almost mythological. But it happened. Jon-Erik's family apparently chose not to meet Washington because the experience would have been too painful. That choice deserves respect. People sometimes assume donor families should want emotional connection with recipients. Some do. Some do not. There is no correct grieving process. For one family, meeting the recipient may feel healing. For another, hearing the heartbeat may be unbearable. Grief must be allowed to choose its own boundaries. Michael Washington lived for many more years. The source states that he survived until 2002. Jon-Erik died in 1984. That means his heart continued working long after his own consciousness had ended. What a remarkable form of legacy. The heart was only one donation. One kidney went to a very young boy. Another went to an older woman who had spent years waiting for a compatible organ. One cornea restored sight to an older man. The other went to a young girl. Skin tissue helped treat a badly burned child. Pause on that. A boy's body could process blood because Jon-Erik's kidney was functioning inside him. Someone could see because Jon-Erik had donated corneal tissue. A burned child could receive treatment because tissue remained useful after Jon-Erik's death. This completely changes the emotional geometry of the story. One death. Multiple continuations. The actor who had spent years trying to be seen was literally helping another person see. That is almost too symbolic to believe. We spend enormous amounts of time thinking about legacy in terms of reputation. Will people remember my name? Will anyone watch my movies? Will my business survive? Will my children talk about me? But Jon-Erik's story offers a radically different definition. Legacy does not always mean being remembered. Legacy can mean being useful after you are gone. The recipient may not know you. History may not record everything. But somebody breathes easier because you existed. Somebody sees. Somebody grows older. Somebody gets another birthday. What greater form of consequence could there be? We should also spend time with Jon-Erik's mother. Celebrity stories often center the famous person so completely that family grief becomes background. But imagine her position. She had raised him through instability. Worked hard to provide. Supported culture and education. Watched him develop talent. Watched him leave home. Watched him become the kind of man strangers recognized. Then came the phone call every parent fears. An accident. A hospital. Brain injury. No meaningful chance of recovery. And because Jon-Erik was an organ donor, his mother also had to participate in allowing the medical process to continue. There is enormous strength in honoring someone's wishes when your emotions desperately want the opposite. A grieving mother might naturally want to keep her son's body physically present as long as possible. But Jon-Erik had made a choice. His organs could help others. She honored that. This is an act of love that deserves recognition. Love is not always holding on. Sometimes love means respecting what someone wanted even when letting go feels unbearable. After the donation procedures and official processes were completed, Jon-Erik's body was eventually cremated. His ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean near Malibu. There is something fitting about that image. A body that had been photographed, filmed, admired, and commercialized eventually becoming impossible to possess. No studio. No photographer. No fan. No tabloid. Just ocean. Elizabeth Daly later reflected that Jon-Erik had seemed unusually stressed before the accident. According to the source, she connected his state to ambition and the way he was pushing himself. We must be careful here. Stress did not pull the trigger. Ambition alone did not kill him. The direct event was an accidental firearm discharge at extremely close range. But Daly's observation raises a deeper question. What happens when ambition begins eroding judgment? Hollywood rewards people who are always on. Always charming. Always ready. Always physically capable. Always available. Always competing. Actors live with instability. A show can disappear. A role can be recast. A younger competitor arrives. You gain weight and someone notices. You lose momentum and agents stop calling. At 26, Jon-Erik was moving quickly. But rapid success can create its own terror. Once you begin rising, you become afraid of falling. That pressure may produce restlessness, exhaustion, impatience, a feeling that every day must count. Many people watching this may recognize that sensation without ever entering Hollywood. You finally start succeeding in business. So you work harder. Revenue grows. So you work harder. People compliment your discipline. So you work harder. Eventually your identity becomes attached to momentum. Rest begins feeling dangerous. You think, if I slow down, someone will pass me. This is how ambition can become self-consuming. Ambition is not bad. It creates art, medicine, companies, scientific breakthroughs. But ambition needs boundaries. A car without an accelerator never moves. A car without brakes eventually crashes. Wisdom is not choosing between ambition and caution. Wisdom is learning to operate both. Young adulthood comes with a strange psychological gift and danger. Many young people feel physically invincible. You heal quickly. You recover after little sleep. You take risks. You assume serious accidents happen to somebody else. Jon-Erik was athletic, strong, confident physically. And perhaps that made a prop weapon feel even less threatening. This is not an excuse. It is an observation about risk psychology. People who are accustomed to physical competence sometimes overestimate their ability to control environments. An experienced skier goes faster. A skilled driver takes tighter chances. A trained athlete pushes the limit. Competence can reduce fear. Usually that is useful. But fear sometimes contains information. One of the most dangerous phrases in any high-risk environment is, "I know what I'm doing." Maybe you do. But physics does not care about confidence. Firearms do not care about charisma. Machinery does not care about experience. Gravity does not care how many times you succeeded before. Humility around dangerous systems is not cowardice. It is intelligence. Jon-Erik's death became a tragic reminder that a prop can still be dangerous. And decades later, the entertainment industry would continue facing painful accidents involving firearms. The central lesson remains painfully simple: never allow familiarity to replace safety. Imagine a man who drives home after drinking. The first time, he knows it is wrong. His heart beats faster. But he gets home safely. The second time, he is less afraid. Again, nothing happens. By the 10th time, he says, "I'm a good driver." What has actually happened? Has the behavior become safer? No. His fear has decreased. That is not the same as risk decreasing. This distinction matters everywhere. A factory worker bypasses a safety lock because it saves 10 minutes. Nothing happens. Soon everyone does it. A trader risks far too much on one position and wins. The result teaches the wrong lesson. A person mixes medications carelessly and feels fine. The absence of immediate consequence becomes mistaken for proof. Human beings learn strongly from outcomes. But sometimes outcomes lie. Unsafe behavior can produce good results temporarily. Safe behavior can produce bad results occasionally. Wisdom requires evaluating the process, not only the outcome. Jon-Erik had likely handled props before. Nothing happened. Until it did. And then there was no opportunity for correction. This is why safety rules often seem annoyingly excessive right up until the moment they save a life. There is a particular emotional quality to photographs of people who died young. The face remains frozen at the age when the future still seemed enormous. James Dean, Natalie Wood, River Phoenix, Jon-Erik Hexum. We never see their ordinary aging. No wrinkles. No receding hairline. No middle-age interviews. No photographs with grandchildren. Their public image becomes permanently young. That creates mythology. But mythology can hide the greater tragedy. Aging is not something people are lucky to avoid. Aging is something people are lucky to experience. We spend enormous energy fighting age. Anti-aging products. Cosmetic procedures. Filters. Advertisements promising youth. But look at someone who died at 26 and the meaning changes. A wrinkle is evidence of time received. Gray hair is evidence of mourning survived. Being 60 is not a failure to remain 25. It is a privilege denied to many people. Jon-Erik never got to become 30. Never 40. Never 50. The next time you complain about a birthday, remember what the alternative is. Age is not the enemy. Time is the gift. It is impossible not to speculate. What kind of career might Jon-Erik Hexum have built? He had several advantages. Physical presence. Athleticism. A strong voice. Musical ability. Education. Television experience. Growing recognition. He could have moved into action films, romantic dramas. More television. Perhaps directing. Perhaps producing. Maybe he would have become one of the major stars of the late 1980s and 1990s. Or perhaps Hollywood would have changed and his career would have cooled. That possibility matters too. We tend to assume people who die young were destined for greatness because death freezes them at the moment of promise. But careers are unpredictable. Maybe Jon-Erik would have become enormous. Maybe not. The tragedy does not depend on proving he would have become a superstar. A life has value even if the career would eventually have failed. This is an important correction to celebrity culture. We often say, he could have made so many great films. True. But he also could have lived ordinary years. Maybe he would have married. Cooked dinner. Called his mother. Argued with a neighbor. Changed careers. Adopted a dog. Taken care of aging relatives. Those possibilities matter just as much. A person's value is not measured by the entertainment they might have produced for us. Jon-Erik's lost future belonged to him. Not to Hollywood. At the time of his death, Jon-Erik's estate was valued at a substantial but not enormous amount. He was successful, but he had not yet accumulated the fortune that a long leading man career might have produced. Again, the unfinished nature of the life becomes visible. His career was still in the building stage. The major wealth may have been ahead. But money becomes strangely irrelevant when discussing someone who died at 26. This is worth remembering whenever we treat wealth as a final score. Suppose one person dies with $10 million and another dies with $100,000. What exactly does the difference mean to them at that moment? Money matters enormously while we are alive. It provides safety. You leave the way your children remember love. You leave the confidence you gave a coworker. You leave the knowledge you taught someone. You leave the apology you made. Or the apology you refused to make. You leave the kindness you showed strangers. You leave the damage you caused. You leave the standards you modeled. You leave stories. Habits. Memories. Sometimes money. Sometimes wisdom. Sometimes wounds. Legacy is not something that begins after death. Legacy is being constructed now. Jon-Erik Hexum probably did not imagine that signing an organ donor card would become one of the most important decisions associated with his name. He likely expected decades more acting, more television, more films, more relationships, more mistakes, more chances to grow. That is how most of us live. We assume there will be time later to become the person we mean to become. Later I'll call. Later I'll change. Later I'll apologize. Later I'll get healthy. Later I'll stop wasting my life. Later. Jon-Erik's story destroys the comfort of that word. 26-year-olds die. Healthy people die. Successful people die. People with plans die. People in love die. People in the middle of building something die. Mortality does not wait for narrative completion. That sounds dark. But it can also be liberating. Because once you understand that time is not guaranteed, ordinary life becomes more valuable. Breakfast with your mother. A phone call with your brother. Driving home safely. A boring Tuesday. A body that works. Eyes that can see. A heart that keeps beating without you having to think about it. These are miracles disguised as routine. We ignore them because they repeat, until one day they don't. Jon-Erik had extraordinary gifts. But perhaps the greatest lesson from his life does not concern talent. It concerns attention. Pay attention to risk. Pay attention to people. Pay attention to time. Pay attention to what your ambition is doing to you. Pay attention when you begin believing you are invulnerable. Pay attention to the people who made your opportunities possible. Pay attention to the body you assume will always work. And pay attention to the fact that somebody else's life may improve because of a decision you make today. We live in a culture obsessed with being remembered. People want followers. Views. Awards. Names on buildings. Jon-Erik Hexum received fame. But ask yourself, which is more meaningful? That strangers still recognize his photograph? Or that a father lived additional years because Jon-Erik's heart continued beating inside him? That is not an easy question. But I know which answer moves me more. Fame says, look at me. Legacy says, something good continued because I was here. There is a huge difference. Jon-Erik's career might have become enormous. We will never know. Maybe he would have become one of the defining stars of his generation. Maybe he would have won awards. Maybe he would have directed. Maybe he would eventually have left acting. None of those possibilities survived October 1984. But something else did. Generosity. A choice. A donor card. A heart. And because of that, the worst day in one family's life became the beginning of hope for several others. This is why I don't want Jon-Erik Hexum remembered only as the actor who accidentally killed himself with a blank. That sentence is factually connected to what happened, but spiritually it is too small. He was more than the accident. He was a son raised by a hardworking mother. A musician. A student. An athlete. A young man willing to clean apartments while chasing a dream. An actor frustrated by being reduced to his appearance. A performer who wanted to improve. A boyfriend. A brother. A person who clearly had flaws. A person capable of careless judgment. And a person who, before he knew he would need it, made a decision that allowed others to live. That is a human story. Messy. Painful. Beautiful. And unfinished. Maybe that is the most haunting part. His story remains unfinished because every young death does. But perhaps the people who received his organs became a kind of continuation. Michael Washington received more years. Children grew. Patients saw. Families got more time. Jon-Erik did not get those years himself. Nothing can make that fair. But fairness is not the only thing humans can create from tragedy. We can create meaning. We can create prevention. We can create generosity. We can make the next person safer. We can sign the donor card. We can stop treating a dangerous object casually. We can call the person we love. We can stop postponing life. And maybe that is the most powerful way to honor someone who died too soon. Not by staring endlessly at the tragedy, but by learning something that makes our own lives more deliberate. So tonight, after this video ends, ask yourself, what are you postponing? Who are you taking for granted? What risk have you normalized because nothing bad has happened yet? What dream are you afraid to pursue? What relationship needs your attention? What kind of legacy are your ordinary decisions creating? You do not need to become famous. Jon-Erik's story proves that fame itself is fragile. You need to become useful, present, honest, careful, generous, alive while you are alive. 26 years were all Jon-Erik Hexum received. That was not enough. It never could have been enough. But within those years, he reached people through television. And after those years ended, he reached people in an even more literal way. But because of how profoundly parts of him continued living afterward. One mistake ended his future. One earlier act of generosity created futures for other people. Think about that contrast. The careless decision lasted seconds. The generous decision created consequences that lasted years. Both choices mattered. That is life. We rarely know which ordinary decision will become enormous. So choose carefully. Choose kindly. Choose courageously. And when possible, choose something that leaves the world with more life than it had before you. Jon-Erik Hexum wanted to become a star. For a brief moment, he did. But stars eventually disappear from view. What matters more is the light they leave behind. If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with someone who remembers Jon-Erik Hexum or loves classic television history, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about the fascinating people behind Hollywood's most unforgettable faces. And before you go, I want to leave you with one final question. If your life unexpectedly ended tomorrow, what part of the way you live today would continue helping someone else? Think about that. Take care of your time. Take care of the people you love. And never confuse being young with having unlimited tomorrows. Thank you for watching. And I'll see you in the next story.